This week's robot model is inspired by wading birds. From the herons to the egrets, the sandpipers, and the stilts, and of course all the other semi-aquatic shorebirds that didn't make the list. And this bot is loosely inspired from these birds, mostly just the legs and the feet as well as the wetland environment. The main body is pretty simple. I'm going to start with these two Gundam accessory parts as they fit together into this nice shape. Then I'll add this toy part as the lower half. The inside is pretty hollow though, so I'll mix up a batch of this 2-part epoxy putty and I'll fill the space on the inside to make sure all the parts have plenty of surface area to glue to later. Before the epoxy fully cures, I use the neck and the lower body to press the connection point into the putty to create an indentation that I can glue to later. This will give me a bit more surface area and a tighter fit, like it was molded together. I use a bit of isopropyl alcohol between the parts to keep things from sticking and to create a sharp indentation. Once the epoxy is cured, I can glue everything together using some super glue and add on a few extra greeblies. Let's move on to making the head. Most of these parts are from various Gundam accessory kits I've collected over time. The head itself isn't very bird-like, but I did pull inspiration from Chappie, the robot from the 2015 film also called Chappie, especially when it comes to the antennas that I'm building here that will attach to either side of the head. I'll add a neck made from armature wire and a few small details using some old guitar wire. The legs and the feet are really where the wading bird features come into play. Using various toy parts, styrene, metal rods, and plastic tubes, I build up the drumstick of the leg, also known as the upper leg. I'll add a few extra plastic tubes to build up some shape, and then I'll close it all up with another Gundam accessory part. The lower half of the leg starts with this plastic hinge as the knee joint, and I'll add a brass rod for the lower leg. I'm using metal since these are pretty skinny legs and I want to make sure that they're strong enough. I'll add a few styrene tubes for extra flavor and then cap it off with 1/2 of a small ball joint. A few pieces of plastic are cut up and added around the joint to add some visual interest, and then I can move on to the feet. The feet are made from a styrene rod, specifically the toes. Each one is made from a 1/2-inch pointed piece and a 1/4-inch square piece. They're rounded at each end, and then using a very small drill bit, I drill 2 small holes in each connecting end and attach the 2 parts together with some thin garden wire. Adding this garden wire allows me to adjust the angle of the front toes later when I attach it to the base, and it also adds some structural stability so that the toes don't fall off the second I touch them. I make 3 toes per foot, and then they'll attach to this plastic piece, which is another Gundam accessory part. 1 on each side and then 1 in the middle. I'll then attach the foot to the other side of the ball joint from the leg. Most birds have 2 legs, so I make a second one to match. The nice thing about the ball joint ankle is that since it's posable, I can adjust the leg position easier when it comes time to getting the bot into its final position. If you didn't know, birds don't have arms. They have wings. This robot is going to have arms, and also hands. And to make said arms, it's a very similar process to the legs. Some plastic and metal parts come together to make an arm shape. This time, it also includes a wooden bead as the elbow joint, really spicing things up in the materials department. The hands are made entirely from styrene. The last bot I made didn't have arms, or hands, but quite a few before that utilized pre-made Gundam hands, because they're easy. So I decided with this one, I would go back to my pre-Gundam roots and build the hands from scratch. It takes much longer this way, but it's also much more rewarding, and I can customize them easier. I use a rhinestone wax pen to add these small styrene details to the side of the fingers. This tool has become invaluable in my shop, and I use it in almost every build for adding small details like these. It's such a simple tool, but it's so useful. Once the fingers are complete, I can add them to a piece of styrene that makes up the palm. Once the hand is complete, I can add it to the arm, and then just like the legs, I make a second one to match. At this point, I add some battleship pegs as connection points for the arms and to act as shoulders, as well as a styrene tube for the hip joints. Using that wax pen again, I add a few plastic lenses to the eye holes to give this bot some eyes. The building is complete, and now all the parts get put on paint sticks and sent outside for a coat of primer. When I was first planning this bot out, I thought I would take inspiration from the flamingo and paint it a pink-orange color. I never found the right pink color I was looking for though, so I just went with Old Faithful, yellow, white, and gray. Using my gallery airbrush, I do a base coat with a gold yellow and then hand painting with gray and white, plus a bit of black down the road. Now that we are in the painting process, it's time to give a shout out to all my lovely patrons over on my Patreon. Thank you all so much for the support. Of course, there is no pressure to join, but if you are interested in getting a shout out in every video, plus some cool behind the scenes footage, you can also join the Patreon. All of links at the end of this video on my page and in the description. And as always, if you're liking what you're seeing here, please do consider liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, all that good stuff that helps the YouTube algorithm pick up this video and show it off. Kind of a funny story about this bot. I'm calling it the procrastination bot because I've been working on a huge project for the big bot bash this year, and I finished the build and the filming, but it's like 3 times as much footage to edit compared to a normal video. So instead of editing that video, I built and filmed and edited and did the voiceover for this bot you're watching now, because starting the editing for that other project was just so intimidating. At this point, I have finished the first rough draft edit of that video, so you'll all see it next Saturday when it comes out. So keep an eye out and make sure you're subscribed because this next bot is going to be the largest and most unique bot I have ever made. So far. The rest of this painting process is pretty self-explanatory. I'm just using a Sharpie to add some detail lines, and then I will break out some water decals and add those on as well. I'll pop back in for the weathering process. This weathering has become sort of my standard process. I mix up a wash made from black and brown acrylic paint, thinned down with water, and a splash of isopropyl alcohol to break the surface tension of the water. This allows the wash to get into all the cracks and crevices and not beat up on the surface. I apply the wash over all the parts, and then I dab up any extra with a paper towel. This is usually my first step of weathering because it adds a nice overall base layer of grime that focuses on the corners and the low points, and the next step of weathering has a hard time getting into those spaces. The next step in weathering is some of this Tamiya Weathering Master. It's just compressed powder pigments, and I use a makeup sponge brush to mix up a dark, rusty cocktail of color and apply it to the model. As you can see, it's great for getting a realistic grime layer on all the faces of the parts, but it doesn't get into the corners as well. So using a mix of liquid and dry weathering is a great way of getting solid coverage. And these Tamiya weathering kits last a long time. I've had this one for just about 6 months now, using it almost weekly, and I've just barely made a dent in one of the pans. Here's a new weathering tool that I just picked up this week, and I'm trying it out for the first time on this bot. It's a chipping pen, and if you use it correctly, it can look like paint is chipped off and expose the metal underneath. I focus on the edges as those are the areas most prone to chipping. Now this technique does require somewhat of a steady hand, so if you're unsure about it, just do some practice on a scrap piece first. I bought this pen with my own money, and I'm not sponsored by AK or anything, but I just thought it was a cool tool and wanted to share it with you guys. As we enter into the home stretch here, I can put everything back together and our shoreline bot starts to take shape. Now, I've talked about how I was inspired by those long-legged birds, but besides that, I don't really have a purpose or a job in mind for this guy. So, as I sometimes do, I would like you all to come up with a story or a job or a purpose for this bot. Maybe even give him a name if you're feeling up for it. I'd love to hear your stories down in the comment section. You all have come up with some really great and fun ideas in the past, and I always love reading the comments. The base you're seeing here was built in a previous video, and then I just didn't use it. But I want it to look a bit more swampy, wetlandish, so I'm cutting up some of these styrene pieces, gluing them together, and then with a bit of paint and weathering, they'll look like little water plants. I make about a half dozen of these with different leaf shapes and amount of leaves and size, and then I'll send them outside to get a coat of flat black primer, and then I paint them green, and I give them also a bit of a brown wash to add some color difference. To attach my plants in place, I dig out a small hole using a pick. There's just some foam under here, so it's pretty soft. And then using some foam-safe superglue, I can glue my little water plants into their position. It's starting to look a bit more like a wetland, but I think it needs to look a bit more wet. And so to do that, I'll be using some of this realistic water from Woodland Scenics. I mixed up a small amount of acrylic paint into it to add some color, which didn't really matter in the end because you can't see it. I pour it over and then spread it out with a stick. Once that's cured after about 24 hours, I add a bit more mud to their feet since it's been walking through the mud and so it's going to have mud on its feet. And with that, this project is pretty much done. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. I certainly had a good time procrastinating and building an entire bot. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, put it down in the comment section and I will try to get back to you. I do read every single comment and I try to respond if I can. I'll have a link in the description where you can find my Amazon storefront, which has a bunch of tools and materials that I use for making these videos. I will say, if you are looking for tools and materials, please do check out your local shops first. It's always nice to support a local business before you have to order online. If you did enjoy this video, please check out my other videos on my channel. I've got plenty to choose from. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.